the
Start the camera anytime.
different things that we did for the war effort, like the metal, the scrap metal drives and the war bond drives. And I remember clearly when Johnny Sheffield, most people don't know who he is, but he played Boy in the Tarzan movies. He came through town on a big tractor trailer with a tank on the back of it, and he was in that tank, and it was a war bond drive. And I can tell how we bought war bonds and how we bought the stamps and what the bond was like. I think I did something on that at one time, but I can't remember.
I think
sure.
you told me, but I don't know if we did that actually on film.
Yeah, but all of that stuff is kind of interesting to people that have never been through it because they have no idea what went on.
So,
but I remember the ration stamps and how you had to have ration stamps to buy gas and to buy tires for your cars.
So you would have to buy so that was like currency then? A ration stamp?
No, you're allowed ration stamps, and they had WPA, where you had to go down and apply for stamps based on your income and your family.
Oh, okay.
So, for instance, if you wanted to buy meat, you had to have a ration stamp to buy beef. And if you had a family of 4, you could buy 3 pounds of meat, for instance. But if you had a family of 6, you could get ration stamps for 6 pounds of meat.
All right.
Same way with sugar. Sugar was rationed. There was a lot of the commodities were rationed. Rubber tires for cars were rationed. Gasoline was rationed.
So
a lot of food stuff was rationed.
So the rationing was because the extra was needed for the war effort?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
Well,
you need to explain why the rationing.
Yeah, the what?
Why the rationing? Because of the war?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
all
Because because the gasoline and the rubber and the metals and stuff were all for the war effort. And if you wanted to buy something, and you had the money to buy it, and if it was something that was predominantly for the war effort, then there was a ration on that particular item as to how much you could buy. And that included some beef, like canned beans, you could buy as many as you want. But beef and sugar and gasoline and tires for your car, all that stuff was rationed. You had to have a ration stamp to buy it, and to get the ration stamp, you had to apply for it and show what your income, or not necessarily your income, but the size of your family and what your needs might be based on the size of your family.
So as a retailer, and I'm just throwing this out, as a retailer, a store that was selling a tire shop, they wouldn't sell you any tires unless you had, and they would only sell you tires for what you had a ration stamp for. So
Sugar's the same way, beef the same way. If you go down to the meat market, because in those days you didn't sell meat usually in the stores, you had to go to the meat market.
Yeah.
So you had to have ration stamps to buy pork or beef or whatever you was going to buy. Chicken, usually you didn't have to have a ration stamp for chicken.
Because it was so prevalent.
Because, nearly everybody raised chickens.
Yeah.
So very few people bought chickens back in those days.
Right.
Just about everybody had chickens.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah.
One time we had 2,000 of them. My dad raised chickens at one time.
That's new. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Really?
it just suddenly popped into my mind. Yeah, we had a chicken ranch at one time.
Really?
In Oregon?
My dad had 2,000.
So were they?
Was that in Oregon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Were they laying chickens for the eggs, or were they?
Or they were pullets for meat.
For meat.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And how did he sell them? I mean, just local people.
Yeah,
would come and buy
he would contact the local meat markets.
Yeah.
And he would sell them 2 ways, either dressed or undressed. If they were dressed, we would kill them and pluck them, and Mom would get out there. When you pluck a chicken, it has what they call pin feathers.
Yeah.
And I remember very clearly, we had a big wood fire out there, and Mom would take these chickens after they were plucked. She would take these chickens and with a big glove on, and push them through this fire to roast, to burn off those pin feathers.
Really? They were already dead.
Oh, they were dead,
Yeah.
sure. They were dead and dressed, and
yeah.
the guts taken out of them. They had the legs on them, and the wings, but the head was gone. All the innards was out, and the feathers were all plucked off. But they had these little pin feathers, and she would put them in that fire, burn the pin feathers off.
And were you and your brother and sister, were you involved in plucking the chickens and all
No,
that?
I was only about 2 years old, a year and a half or 2 years
So,
old.
was your did your dad hire people to do that, or was that all done by your mom and dad?
Aunts and uncles, mom and dad, and aunts and
It
uncles.
was kind of a
yeah.
family thing.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah, my dad and that. I don't remember the details as to why they quit doing that, but the next thing I remember is they had a potato chip business, and they had this big deep fryer, and mom and my aunts would sit around and peel these potatoes and slice them up, put them in this fryer, and Dad and Uncle Russell would scoop these potato chips out, and they put them in just brown paper bags. And the oil, or literally the oil, would show in the brown paper bags, but they would roll them up and staple them shut, and then they would sell them to restaurants and stores and stuff for like 10 cents a bag, or 5 cents a bag, and the store would sell them for 7 cents a bag.
Yeah.
And so they, my dad and my Uncle Russell were in the potato chip business at one time.
So entrepreneurship does kind of run in the family
Oh, yeah.
from that standpoint.
Yeah.
But back then, there was a lot more people that just were doing whatever they could just to
Yeah,
survive.
most people back in those days was on welfare.
Yeah.
I remember we lived about 4 miles out of town, and there were people that lived within blocks of us. Everybody sort of lived in a rural area, but I remember 2 or 3 families where they had 3 or 4 kids, and the woman and the kids would walk to town 3 or 4 miles once a week to get clothes for the kids and food for the table. And that was the welfare system. You had to go in and apply for it, and you would get government surplus food and clothes that were donated.
So would that have been during the Depression? Is that why?
That was sort of the end of the Depression. It was like in 38, 39, something like that. I was about 3 or 4 years old. But I can remember pretty clearly. Remember a lot of things that went on when I was 3 or 4 years old. A lot of it didn't happen until I was 6 and 7. The war started in 41. And I was born in 34. So I was 7 years old when the war started. And so from 7 to 12 is when the war was.
Right.
But I remember clear as a bell when Roosevelt died. I remember when the Japs attacked Pearl Harbor, and what a big deal that was. So there's a lot of
That was
memories.
41, right?
Huh?
Yeah, it was
That was
41.
41.
Yeah.
Yeah, December of 41.
Yeah.
2 days after Mom was born.
Oh, no kidding. I didn't know that.
December 7th, yeah.
So I know your dad was also big into agriculture, going around and picking cherries and picking the crops. You kind
Yeah.
of followed the crops at one
Yeah.
point, right?
Yeah, yeah. We when I was little, we picked all the crops. We went out as a family, in when the crops were growing, when they were ready to harvest. We picked cherries, we picked hops, we picked beans and strawberries, cucumbers. And we went out as a family and harvested, and that's how we made a living.
Yeah.
Literally.
So that was a daily, that was your
pretty
job.
much a daily thing. And there was times that, like the old Merle Haggard song, in a canvas-covered cabin, there were times that we lived in the labor camps, and we got up, went to work in the fields, came back in. Mama would cook on an open fire out in front of the cabin, and we would sleep on straw mattresses. And that's the way it was.
And that was a community. There was a whole bunch of people.
Whole community, and there might be 50 of these canvas-covered cabins, and each one had a family unit. And it was just, and we'd get together at night and tell stories and sing songs. And
Yeah.
So
And did that, so that encampment from, would it move, that whole camp move on to a next crop?
no,
Well, it wasn't
no,
portable then.
this was something that was run by the WPA, the Works Project Administration of the government, and they put up the money for the farmers to have these cabins built for the workers.
Okay.
And once the harvest was done, that camp was shut down.
Oh, okay.
No reason to stay there, but the workers would move on to another camp.
Right.
So how did you being a kid and working every day was that, well, I don't know about work, but did you see it as like a fun, exciting thing, having everybody around and being outside, or was it depressing?
Looking back, it was an exciting time, but at the time, it was a way of life. We didn't know anything else. We didn't know
We
anything
didn't
better.
have cell phones.
We knew
Yeah.
that there were people that had a lot more than us. And we knew that mom and dad had to work in order to keep us kids in clothes and food. But it was a way of life. That was all we knew. And we enjoyed what we did. There was never a time, I can remember a time or two getting a spanking I didn't enjoy too much. But my dad had a tendency to sneak up on me if I was screwing around. If I was supposed to be picking hops, for instance. They didn't ask too much of me, but they said, while you're out here, pick some of these hops that are low to the ground and put them in this basket. Put them in mom's basket or dad's basket. These baskets were huge baskets. And once in a while I'd be thinking of different things, how to invent a machine to pick those hops, and my mind would be working. And a hop vine has got hops grow on a vine. Dad would get a vine about this long, and they have little prickles on them, and he'd strip the leaves off, and he'd come up behind me and smack me with, and I usually had shorts on. He'd come up and smack me with that vine because I was goofing off. But,
So I guess that's,
it was good memories.
Now how did school, because your sister and your brother were older than you, how did school play into that?
Well, there was always a school to go to. A lot of times the county would send a bus out, like for my brother and sister, when they were in school.
Yeah.
My brother first, then my brother and sister, and then me. And then, of course, by the time I got into school when I was 7 years old, in the wintertime we had to go to school. So there had to be, and I don't remember all the details, but there had to be schooling by the time I was 7 years old in the wintertime. But most of the time in the harvest, it was after
Summertime.
school was out in the summertime. And then when come time for school, we always had to either live with grandma, or went to school, or we got a place where Dad would cut cordwood, and we lived in a place in Molalla, and we had to walk to school. It was little. That's when I went into the first grade, and I was the only one in the first grade. That was first or second grade. I was the only first or second grader there. So I was actually sitting in this school. They had 8 rows of students, and it was first through 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And the first 2 rows were empty, and I was the only one in them. And so I was doing the work of the 3rd grade, of the 3rd row, when the teacher was doing their work on the board or whatever. I could pretty much do what I wanted. But I got to where I would do the work that the 3rd graders were doing. So by the time I left that that school in Molalla and went into school in Salem the next year, I was way ahead of the kids in the 1st and 2nd grade, way ahead. But that was because I was doing 3rd and 4th grade work. That's the thing about being in a school like that. The 3rd graders can see what the 8th graders are doing.
Yeah.
Fourth graders can see what the eighth graders are doing. So if they're capable, they can get an eighth grade education when they're in the fourth grade.
Wow. Yeah.
They don't have
Sounds
anything
like a
like
good
that
idea.
anymore.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
a good idea.
Yeah.
And it was a great idea. And the children that came up through that system are the ones that built this country.
Yeah. Wow. Good point.
But they don't have anything like that at all now. They're just
Well, I remember when I was young, when I was in kindergarten, we lived out in Orland
yeah.
and went to Lake School out there, and it was that way. That was probably at the end of that whole thing.
Yeah.
But I was a kindergarten, and there was kindergarten through 8th grade in the same. It was one row of each, and I was in the kindergarten aisle, and then we moved on from there.
That's how come you're such a smart ass now.
I guess so. I guess that's it. There's no. I don't know what happened with him. I mean,
I don't know. I don't know how I survived.